Universal Casualty, Super Q,
los Miami Dolphins y tú, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Son los Dolphins, nuestros Miami Dolphins, el team número 1 en toda la nación. Y son ellos orgullo de Miami y de todos los latinos en la capital del sol. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Este año no me hablen de los Redskins, no me hablen de los Chargers, ni de los Dallas Cowboys, porque los Dolphins son número 1 y lo demostrarán al llegar al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Nuestra línea está mejor que nunca y nuestra defensiva fue siempre la mejor. Y es por eso que yo no tengo duda que los Miami Dolphins ganarán el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl.
Universal Casualty
Y Super Q, los primeros. Bueno, caballeros, todo el mundo que cante con nosotros. Dame una D, dame una O, dame una L, dame una P, una H, una I, una N, una S, que es lo que tenemos. Miami Dolphins. Me voy para el Super Bowl. 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 Me voy para el Super Bowl.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
There's a team that's in our hearts. We've got love that won't depart.
Howdy, Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphin Show, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker. With me today and every day is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. Aaron, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
There we go. I like that. Good intro. Good intro. Hey, we're back. Another show in the same room. It's pretty exciting. Glad you're still here.
For a little bit longer.
A couple more days before you go back home, and then you come back. It's funny, right before we went on the air, we decided whether or not we were going to talk about this, and I said, we don't need to talk about it, but now we're talking about it. You're moving. You signed the lease.
It's official.
It's official, baby. Brain is coming to New York.
Coming to Central New York.
Let's go. Aaron the Brain coming to New York. We're excited. That just means lots more opportunities for live in-person versions of the Same Old Dolphin Show, which is very, very exciting. But Brain, last time we were here, the Dolphins had set their initial 53-man roster, and we stressed initial 53-man roster because there were almost certainly going to be some changes, and lo and behold, changes there have been. A number of different moves made. A number of guys that were released have been brought back and added to the practice squad. Dolphins have sent a couple of players away. They sent Patrick McMorris to injured reserve. They brought back Blake Ferguson, which we expected somehow or another Blake Ferguson was going to come back. And the Dolphins also added a wide receiver, which is something that was certainly welcome to folks after, the injury concerns. We talked a lot about how worried we are about Odell Beckham and what that situation is going to be like. And I think there are a lot of reasons to think that could be an issue down the road, but we won't stress too much about that today because we talked about it last time. But the Dolphins brought in Grant DuBose, wide receiver from the Green Bay Packers. And obviously that's a tough wide receiver room to make. A lot of talent in that room. And Grant DuBose comes to Miami, and the Dolphins made a cut in order to add DuBose to the roster. And the cut they made was a little bit of a head scratcher, Brain, because they released Jack Driscoll, who was an offseason signing and who had in the preseason been one of the more consistent Miami Dolphins offensive linemen. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
And the Dolphins have moved on from him. And so, it brings us back to the offensive line. And there are a number of concerns about that. So let's go back to about a year ago when Chris Greer had this to say.
Well, I think you guys are probably more worried than we are, in terms of, at the position depth at those spots you talked about.
And the positions that he's talking about there is the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think he was also tight end was the other position group that he
tight
was
end
talking
was the
about,
other
but
group.
Offensive line was front and center there.
And then just the other day, Chris Greer had this to say.
But we're confident in the offensive line. So again, it's just one of those. It's Mike and I we always kind of chuckle. I know you guys made a joke about me saying that you guys are more worried about it than we are. But internally, that's how we feel about our group here as a team.
So Chris Greer thinks we're making jokes about him not being worried about the offensive line. And this is after he releases one of the more consistent offensive linemen we have. So, Brain, this is a head scratcher for me because I don't know. I know that systematically the Miami Dolphins offense is built around not having a heavy reliance on the offensive line, right? It's built around getting rid of the ball fast and the offense moving fast. So they're not relying on having a super robust offensive line, but that strategy has its limits. And we saw those limits come into play, last year after Connor Williams got hurt.
Yeah. And I'm not a fan of this move. I'll preface what I'm saying by saying, this is not a move that I would have made. I could think of a few other players that I would have cut before Jack Driscoll. But what this move tells you is there is confidence in some of the interior offensive linemen they kept, and specifically Andrew Meyer. Jack Driscoll got some run in the preseason and in training camp as like the team's third center, and Andrew Meyer clearly beat him out in that role. And to me, this says that maybe they feel like Andrew Meyer can potentially play guard as well, and that Jack Driscoll was clearly not going to be a starter behind Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg. And frankly, I don't know, potentially he was also behind Lester Cotton. I don't know. And so the only sense that I can make of this is that if it came down to Andrew Meyer versus Jack Driscoll, then two things come into play, which is number one, money, because you're talking about an undrafted free agent versus a free agent that was signed in the offseason. And more importantly than that, because we're not talking about a huge dollar amount either way, we're talking about team control, because Driscoll was signed on a 1-year deal, whereas Andrew Meyer, if he makes this roster, which, I mean, he's made the roster, the team conceivably has control over him for 4 years as a cheap contract. So if they feel good about Andrew Meyer and they feel like they're not really having much of a drop off there, then they feel like they've got, upside at that position with that move, and they've got player control there. So in that regard, that's gotta be what they're thinking. But does this move make them better this year? Releasing at worst your fourth best interior offensive lineman and bringing in a receiver that will likely not play very much, considering that he's coming over from a similar offensive system. So, it's not like a huge learning curve there, but he's coming in as the fifth wide receiver to start the season. And if you're projecting that you're going to get back Odell Beckham Jr. and you're going to get back River Craycraft, and we spent a lot of time on the last episode talking about how you're going to have Jonnu Smith and Tanner Connor getting, being used predominantly as wide receivers, and you're going to line up Devon Achane in the slot and he's going to be used as a faux wide receiver. So it's like, how valuable is it to add that player when you're releasing a guy that, if the injury bug happens the way it did last year, is going to end up being a very important piece to this roster? So I don't really love this move. Like I said, I can understand it to a certain extent, but this is again a move that says we're not necessarily going for it this year. We're taking sort of a long view.
And that is exactly what I was going to say, is that this is a lot of what we have seen this offseason. And we said it even all through free agency, is that the Dolphins are not playing to push all their chips to the center of the table this season. They are playing to that they are trying to move things into the future. They're looking ahead, like next year, I think, being a year where they're going to be in an all-in moment. But that's not where they are at this particular moment in time. And whether you agree with that or don't agree with it, it is what it is. I think it is fair to say that Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel are not acting like two people whose jobs are on the line if this team doesn't succeed at a high level this season. That's not to say that if this team goes, 6-11, that there won't be repercussions, felt all the way down the line. But this is certainly a general manager and head coach whose approach to this upcoming season suggests that they understand that they don't feel pressure to win the entire thing right now, and that they are looking at it in terms of trying to continue forward progress, and whether that's something that they're able to do remains to be seen. But it seems like that is the approach, trying to continue to move forward, trying to continually get better, trying to progress, while at the same time not sacrificing a greater opportunity to win a little bit further down the line. And I think it's fair, if you are a fan and you don't like that, If you are a fan who is interested in seeing the Miami Dolphins compete for a Super Bowl, it is okay to feel like, I don't like this plan, I don't like that tactic. That's all right. But I think it's important. I'm doing a little bit of fence sitting here, but I think it's objectively fair to say that's the approach that the team is taking. Whether you agree with it or not, that's entirely up to you. And I am in no place to judge anybody for their opinion about that. I have my opinion about it. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today, is how we believe this Miami Dolphins team is going to perform this season. We're going to talk about how we're going to preview the season in just a moment. But first, a reminder, if you're not doing so already, make sure you are following us on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. Shout out to everybody watching live. We're happy to be with you today on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. Shout out to everybody on the I'm a Miami Dolphin Fan Facebook page. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. We're almost to a landmark number on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and subscribe, would you? If you're listening in podcast form, if you are listening, you're download, rated, reviewed, and subscribed on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, whether it's on the main Dolphins Talk feed, the Same Old Dolphin Show feed, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating, a positive review. And if you haven't done so yet, go over to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because we appreciate that very much as well. Of course, make sure you're visiting dolphinstalk.com each and every day. It is your one-stop shop for all things Miami Dolphins. And big time stuff here, Dolphins Talk Extra. We have just announced our Survivor pool and Pick'em pool for the season. So if you want to get in on those, and we've got some cool prizes, very rare Raheem Mostert bobblehead dolls up for grabs in both of those competitions. We've got the Tyreek Hill bobblehead doll up for grabs in the Fantasy Football League. Of course, the Fantasy Football League is already full, but the Pick'ems and the Survivor pool are totally open. So anytime between now and next Thursday, when the NFL season kicks off, you can subscribe to Dolphins Talk Extra, join those pools for an opportunity to win one of those really cool and rare Raheem Mostert bobblehead dolls. So head on over to patreon.com/Dolphins Talk for as little as $3 a month. You can sign up for bonus podcasts, interactive shows, access to the Discord channel, and of course, the opportunity to play in our Pick'em pool and Survivor pool. We're having a lot of fun over there at Dolphins Talk Extra. I know that some of you, not everybody is in position to come along for the ride on that, and I get it. We understand. But if you do, if you've got the ability and you want to throw us a few bucks here or there to show your support, we greatly appreciate it and hope that you will come and join the community over there at Dolphins Talk Extra. Let's talk about what we are going to do today on this show, Brain. We're going to preview the season. And the way that we're going to preview the season, it's not going to go week by week. We're not going to give game predictions. We're not going to give record predictions per se today, because we are going to be on the Dolphins Talk staff roundtable on Wednesday night with Mike, Ian, and Tom. So we will give some of those thoughts at that time. We are today going to approach it a little bit differently. What we've done is we've talked about possible outcomes for this Miami Dolphins regular season. We're purely focusing on the regular season here because, I think the postseason is a little bit of a crapshoot, right? Obviously, you can get into the postseason, you can make a deep run. Obviously, you can put yourself in position to make a deep run, but anything is possible once you get into that knockout round, right? So we're really kind of focusing our thoughts here today on the regular season. And what we've decided to do is to we're ranking possible win totals for the Miami Dolphins. Is that right, Brain?
That's correct.
Okay. So here's what we did. We've broken it down as such. There are 5 categories, 5 possible outcomes in terms of how we've ranked this. They are as follows: 0 to 6 wins for the season, which we are classifying here as total and complete failure.
Yeah, it's a disaster.
It's a complete disaster season if the Dolphins finish with between 0 and 6 wins.
Yes.
Okay. The next category is 7 to 8 wins. If the Dolphins finish with 7 or 8 wins, we would classify that as disappointing the team will have clearly regressed from last year.
Yeah, and I would say, just to circle back to the 0-6 wins, 0-6 wins is probably the scenario where, if there's any chance that there's going to be major changes to the front office or to the coaching staff, it's going to happen if this team finishes 0-6 wins. You get to 7 or 8 wins, and there's going to be some rumblings. There may be some tweaks, but certainly the seats will be hot.
Yeah. So that's those numbers. Now, the next category is 9 to 10 wins. This is the category of Dolphins are in it all the way to the end, competing for a playoff spot, possibly even making the playoffs.
And possibly missing the playoffs.
And possibly missing, too.
This is, although the team won 11 games last year, this is sort of closer to where they were at last year. You could say, well, they won 11 games, so if they win 9 to 10 games this season, then that's a slight regression, and that would be fair. But this is more or less like the team is basically treaded water. If they're at the 9 to 10 win, provided they make the playoffs. If they miss the playoffs, then obviously that's a slight regression. But this tier, this 9 to 10 win tier, is basically the team has basically treaded water. They're probably, right on the cusp of a playoff spot. Maybe they make it, maybe they don't. In all likelihood, if they do make it, they're a road team having to go to a Super Bowl contender in the first round. So likely a first round exit.
From there, the next step up is 11 to 12 wins. Here, the team is a definitive playoff team. They are competing for, possibly, maybe even probably, winning the AFC East division.
Right. And again, last year they won 11 games and they tied for the division lead. And obviously they fell short on the tiebreaker.
Having lost twice to Buffalo.
So they could have finished with 11 wins, and one of those wins could have came against Buffalo, and they could have lost a different game, not in the division, and they would have ended up winning the division. If they win 12 games, I would feel supremely confident that they're going to win the division if they win 12 games. And frankly, if they win 11 games, I'd say there's a good likelihood that they win the division. But if you're in this tier, this 11 to 12 win tier, you're definitively a playoff team, and you're arguably a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, you're right on par. You're basically right where everybody would really want this team to be in terms of the regular season, or I think could realistically imagine that this team is going to be during the regular season. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, there's the final category, which we can call the ceiling, which is 13 or more wins, which at that point you are a clear-cut championship contender. You are easily winning the division and competing for the number 1 or number 2 seed in the AFC. That's the ceiling.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go through those tiers. And again, that's 0 to 6 wins is tier 1, tier 2, 7 to 8 wins, tier 3, 9 to 10 wins, tier 4, 11 or 12 wins, and tier 5, 13 or more wins. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the possible outcomes and talk about it from the perspective of what we think is least likely to happen, all the way through what we think is the most likely thing to happen. And here's what we can say right off the bat is that we made our lists separately, and then we compared notes before we went on the air today. And there is only one difference. Like we have basically the only difference in our tiers is
the two
least likely things to happen. We flip-flopped them. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to kick off with that because we might as well jump right in. Right. So Brain, to you, what is the least likely scenario in terms of total wins at the end of the regular season for the Miami Dolphins?
To me, the least likely scenario here is 0 to 6 wins. I think the floor of this team is high enough that it would take, just a lot to go wrong. Obviously, there's a chance that things can happen. Like injuries are part of the game. So if if Tua sustains a major injury and misses the majority of the season, if Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle miss significant time over the course of the season, those three players are such a huge piece of what ultimately will determine how good this team is, that, if those things happen, there is a pathway to this being a complete disaster season. Now, granted, if those things don't happen, I just don't see, I could see you can make the argument the defense is a question mark and the defense could be an absolute dumpster fire. But if those guys are, for the most part, healthy, then I don't see this team being a 6-win or less team, because the offense itself puts the floor high enough. And you could say, well, what about the offensive line? It's such a terrible. Well, the offensive line has been terrible. And this team hasn't been a 6-win or less team since they tore out all the studs. And it was Brian Flores' first season here. And they went, 5-11?
Yep.
Yeah. So they haven't been that bad in that long. And this is certainly a much better team than that. So I think that's the least likely of these range of outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. For me, the least likely outcome is 13 or more wins. And I'll explain why. To me, for this team to hit that 13-win threshold, just about everything that could possibly go right for this Miami Dolphins team is currently constituted has to go right? They have to hit their ceiling as an offense, fully functional, and also get lucky in the health department, right? That's something, and whether you feel it's fair or not fair to say that, the reason the Dolphins last 2 seasons kind of scuffled was because of injury luck, that plays a huge part in it. And whether you want to blame the doctors and the health and safety staff of the Dolphins, the conditioning staff, whatever, there's always luck involved when it comes to injuries. When it comes to a guy falling down the wrong way in practice and landing on Teron Armstead and getting him rolled up, it is what it is. There is luck involved in that. And as we've seen before, when you look at that Philadelphia Eagles team that won the Super Bowl and some of those teams, it's all about, the luck of having a healthy offensive line when you get to the late in the season. And that's always a huge part of it. So that's one of the things that would have to go right for the Dolphins. I think and then on the defensive side of the ball, all of the question marks that exist on the defense, right? And again, I'm not saying that there is a plus or minus chance that anything is going to go the right way, but I think the implementation of that scheme with lesser talent on the interior defensive line, with lesser talent on the edge of the defensive line, given that Jalen Phillips is recovering from an injury. So you don't really know what you're going to get from Jalen Phillips. Bradley Chubb is starting the year on PUP. So you don't even know what you're going to get or when you're going to get anything from Bradley Chubb. You have to get that defense coming back and performing at a high level. Anthony Weaver's scheme has to come in and be seamless, and they've got to be dominant. That's got to mix with an offense hitting its ceiling and all of that has to go right in order for the Dolphins to hit that 13-win threshold, right? And that is always what I thought needed to happen. And where we are in reality is that we are already seeing that things are not going right. We are already seeing that the Dolphins signed Odell Beckham, and he is going to miss at least the first 4 weeks of the season, and he's going to be on PUP. The Dolphins have signed Isaiah Wynn, and they brought him back, and nobody even knows if that man is actually still alive right now because nobody has seen him. Well, who knows whether they're going to roll out Dr. Frankenstein's monster and it's Isaiah Wynn with somebody else's legs. I don't know what the deal is going to be. But the fact is, if the Dolphins needed everything to go exactly right, and they really needed to thread the needle to hit that 13 or more win threshold, we're already seeing that is not happening. And so for me, the odds that they're going to be able to recover from that and then get everything else to go exactly right in order for them to hit their ceiling is just so incredibly unlikely. And don't get me wrong, I would love to be wrong about that. I just don't think that's what's going to happen. So for me, 13 wins or more for the 2024 Miami Dolphins is the least likely scenario. I think it's much more likely that everybody gets hurt, everybody gets a concussion, everybody's on IR, and Tim Boyle is starting multiple games at quarterback for the Miami Dolphins this season. I think 0 to 6 wins is much more likely than hitting the ceiling.
Much more likely.
It's at least one tier more likely.
Okay, you know, and let's again remind that this was the one difference that we had, and the second least likely scenario that I have playing out is the Dolphins winning 13 or more games. Because again, of everything that Josh just said, I do think that there is a pathway to that is much easier than this team just completely bottoming out to finish, to finishing with 6 wins or less. But yeah, the offense would need to absolutely be elite. There would need to be great health, and the defense would need to, at the very least, come on strong by the end of the season and be healthy. I think anything when you talk about either of these scenarios, whether it's the 0 to 6 win tier or the 13 to more win tier, these tiers are very highly going to be determined by injuries.
Sure.
If this team is extremely healthy, there is a pathway to them having 13 or more wins. If this team is disastrously injured, there is a pathway to 0 to 6 wins. If this team is, somewhere in the middle, like most teams are every year in injuries, the reality is they're probably going to be in one of those middle 3 tiers, meaning they're going to win somewhere between 7 to 12 games. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And we'll rank those tiers because we're in complete agreement on the order of those tiers.
Yes. So we both agree that 13 wins hitting the absolute ceiling and 0 to 6 wins, those are the 2 least likely scenarios, right? I know I made it sound like I feel like this team is hopeless. I don't feel like they're hopeless. But, because just like I said, while I think 13 wins is the least likely, I think 0 to 6 wins is the next least likely. I don't think either of those are terribly realistic win totals possibilities for the Miami Dolphins. What do we think are actually much more reasonably possible outcomes for the Miami Dolphins team this year? We're going to talk about it right after this. The DolphinsTalk.com podcast network is sponsored by Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive, Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship it to you. International fans, too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. Caneswear.com. I always feel like I need to throw in another Caneswear.com at the end of that. Because it's actually me. Have we talked about that? That it's me doing the voiceover on the Caneswear gimmick?
You might have mentioned it once or twice.
Yeah, I maybe once or twice before I've mentioned that. But hey, all right, let's go from here. These are the top 3 scenarios. So the next, I guess, the middle scenario, right? Because it's literally right in the middle of the 5 scenarios, the thing that is right in the center in terms of win totals. And again, from here on out, we're in complete agreement. From here, Brain, we both think the next least likely is the Dolphins finishing with 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah. And this tier, this would be a disappointing season.
Yeah.
This would not be an abject failure. Although, if you believe that this would be an abject failure, I can't necessarily disagree with you. I think
finishing under 500, and somebody actually just pointed this out in the comments. Who was it? Was it Mr. McDolphin that said it? Anything under 500. Yeah, Mr. McDolphin says, don't you guys believe anything under 500 is a disaster?
You could make the case for it. I think for this exercise, it's not necessarily a disaster. And I don't necessarily look, there are different types of 7 and 8, or there are different types of seasons that are 7 or 8 win seasons. A 7 or 8 win season, a team could have a 7 or 8 win season, be a good team and be riddled with injuries to key players, and things just don't pan out. But you can see how the framework of the team is still there. That, if one or two things go differently, this is a playoff team. And if one or two things go differently, this is potentially even, better than just a playoff team, but an actual contending team. But yes, if this team was to finish 7 and 8, this would be a disappointing season. And this would be a season where, again, there would be at the very least rumblings. You could potentially see firings. Not just to coordinators. You could see a GM get fired. You could see Mike McDaniel get fired. I think it's in the range of outcomes if they finish below 500. So yes, this would be a failure of a season. But I don't think it's a total disaster, where, it depends how you get there. Like if they're totally healthy and they still go finish under 500, now you're like, oh, okay, this team is just stuck in mediocrity and they have no way out. But generally speaking, the majority of the league is going to be somewhere between 7 and 11 wins. So the difference between a 7 and 10 team and a 10 and 7 team, or an 11 and 6 team even, is typically not very much.
We've talked about that quite often over the years on this show, how the vast majority of NFL teams are all in a relatively similar bucket. Like we used to describe it as whether a team finished, it was like the group of teams that finished 6 and 10 through 10 and 6, or maybe it was like 6 and 10 to 9 and 7. All of those teams, there is very little differentiating a team that finishes 6 and 10 or 7 and 9 or 8 and 8 or 9 and 7. Very little separating those teams. It's often a team that gets 1 or 2 bounces that happens to go the right way, or they have 1 or 2 bounces that go the wrong way, or they suffer 1 or 2 untimely injuries and, they just suffer a little bit of bad luck. That's typically the difference in the NFL when you're talking about those teams that are in that range, right? That are 7 and 8 wins. There's not a lot of difference between a team that's 7 and 8 wins and a team that is, like we said, 9 or 10 wins, depending oftentimes. So yeah, 7 and 8 would be disappointing. Ultimately would be how the team ends up there that I think would determine what kind of repercussions there would be in the offseason. But again, we don't feel like that is the most likely scenario for us. We think that is, it's a possibility. It's something that is possible. It is an outcome that I think there is a slightly clearer path to for this Dolphins team, but I don't know that it's necessarily the most likely or even one of the most likely scenarios.
Right. All we're saying is that it's more likely that this team finishes 7 and 10 or 8 and 9 than it is that they finish, 6 and 11 or worse, or 13 and 4 or better.
Right. That's what we're saying. So the next tier from there is where we have where did we go? Here we are.
11 to 12.
11 to 12 wins is tier number 2. Again, this is where we're looking at a team that is very much in line with what we saw last year,
but maybe a little bit better.
Possibly a little bit better. And we think this is, I think, a fairly likely scenario where, and I think in this scenario, you are looking at a Miami Dolphins team that dispatches with the teams that are clearly worse than they are with ease. A team that does not struggle to beat the bad teams on their schedule. Mm-hmm. But a team that doesn't necessarily know how to beat the teams that are better than them on their schedule. So this is a team that easily sweeps the New England Patriots, that probably sweeps the Jets. Wins.
Well, that depends what you feel about the Jets.
I don't feel
they're a very polarizing team.
Yeah, I don't feel any type of way about the Jets. I'll say that. But this is a team that is going to, you think is going to beat the Seattle Seahawks and beat the Tennessee Titans and beat the Arizona Cardinals and beat the Las Vegas Raiders and win those games. But this is a team that is going to struggle to beat the Buffalo Bills. They're going to struggle perhaps to beat the Los Angeles Rams. They may struggle to beat the Green Bay Packers. They're going to struggle to beat the Houston Texans, the San Francisco 49ers. They're going to struggle in some of these games. They're going to win some of these games, but I think that it's likely that they are going to lose more of the games against those teams that you might look down at paper and say, well, this team is better than they are. And so they're still going to be a good team. They're still going to be competing to win the division. They maybe even do win the division. They have that dynamite offense. It is clicking. They aren't hindered too much by injuries. And, for me, it's very likely that 11-12 is a team that is 11 to 12 wins is a team that is coming down into the final months of the season. And in that brutal stretch in those last 4 or 5 weeks of the season is still managing to at least win a couple of those games. Whereas a 7-8 team is probably maybe not winning any of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, an 11 or 12 win team, in all likelihood, with the competitiveness of the division, like 11 wins tied them for the division lead last year. Again, depending on how the games go, 11 wins could very easily win you the division. 12 wins would almost assuredly win you the division. So if they're in the 11 to 12 win team, this is a good team. This is a great outcome. If this team this team wins 11 to 12 games, given what they lost this offseason and the way that they've restructured their cap health and put themselves in a position where they not only drafted players that project to be much better, year 2, year 3 players than year 1 players, and they've given themselves cap space to where they can make some moves and make further additions to this team in clear areas going into next season and beyond. If this team manages to win 11 to 12 games, especially if they end up winning the division, now you're talking about a team that potentially, is
could win a playoff game. Maybe we're winning a playoff game.
This is the tier where you start to say, this team, I feel like there's a likelihood that they win a playoff game. So this would be a very good outcome. And we're in agreement that this is the second most likely outcome for this team.
Yes.
So we're not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, right? A lot of things possible. There is room. There is room for other solutions between everything is perfect in the best possible scenario and everything is horrible and everything is bad. And that leads us to the final tier and what we think is the most likely scenario for this Miami Dolphins team. That is finishing with 9 or 10 wins. And without giving away a specific record situation, I think this is the most likely scenario for this Dolphins team, because as we have said, and if you've been listening throughout this preseason, I think that this is a team that is, I will be honest. I think that all things considered, this team is probably just a little bit worse than last year's team was. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but to me, starting off with an offensive line that is worse than last year's was, even if we're talking about this offensive line being totally healthy, which it's not currently, right? But even if it was completely healthy, this offensive line as currently constituted is worse than it was last year.
Correct.
Even if fully healthy, and again, like we said, it's already not. On the defensive side of the ball, the interior defensive line is worse than it was last year. Is there a chance that the linebacker core, given how Anthony Weaver's scheme is implemented, could end up being upgraded? Sure. Is it possible that the secondary with Jalen Ramsey playing the cornerback position the way that he wants to play the cornerback position, that could be an area of improvement for the Miami Dolphins? Absolutely. It could be. But to me, it remains a big question mark. And for me, looking at this team and looking at it on paper, at least on paper, and again, the games aren't played on paper, but as I look at it on paper, I think I see an offense that from a skill position perspective is when it's at its healthiest, it's loaded. And it is a skill position group that, you've got to be really excited about. And it is a skill position group that is going to put up some fireworks at times this season. But there are too many areas of this team that I look at on paper and I have big questions and I scratch my head. It's too difficult for me to look at that and go, yes, I'm going to predict that this team is going to be on par with or better than last year's team. To me, I look at this team on paper and I look at it and I go, this team is slightly worse than last year's team. But as I've said before, and I will say it again, while on paper, this team looks slightly worse, it is possible that the way things play out is that this team that looks slightly worse ends up being slightly better, right? There is a path, which is why the second most likely scenario is 11 to 12 wins.
Exactly.
While I think the most likely scenario is they're slightly worse and they end up with 9 or 10 wins, that's still a team that is right in the mix all the way down the line, all the way to the end of the season. They're still in the mix, right? And so there's going to be some excitement and it's going to be fun to watch. Ultimately, my initial suspicion is that this team is going to fall a little bit short of where last year's team did. And that's just how I see it.
Yeah. And I guess at the end of the day, when you look at what we think are their most likely scenario, the most likely scenario that we end up with, which is, like we said, 9 or 10 wins, and the second most likely being 11 to 12 wins, we're saying that our expectation is that the floor of this team, provided things don't go very wrong, is that the floor of this team is 9 wins and that the ceiling of this team is 12 wins. That's what we think is the most likely window for this team. Mm-hmm. And if you were talking about a bell curve, not to get all statistical on you, but what you'd be seeing is that basically you'd have, I'd have to go back to my statistics, but I think you'd have about like 2/3 of the likelihood or the likely outcomes would happen one standard deviation from the mean, which would be the most likely. So that would mean between 7 wins to 12 wins would be like 2/3 of it. And if we're kind of skewing it a little bit towards the most likely being that they're winning, we're probably saying that this is probably like, in all likelihood, it is more likely than not that the Dolphins will finish with 9 wins or more. And this will be a 9 to 12 win team. We're not going overboard and saying they're going to win, 13 plus, but we feel like it's more likely than not that they're going to finish somewhere between 9 to 12 wins, which, I think sounds about right. It's right about where Vegas has us, right? What's the Vegas over?
I think the over under is 9.5 for the Dolphins.
So it sounds about right.
Yeah. So, I mean, there it is. So again, there's some people in the chat that, that think that we're being like way too negative or we're down on the team or anything like that. And I don't see that as the case. I think like you just said, in all actuality, we think it is most likely that this team ends up with somewhere between 9 and 12 wins this season. And that there is, in fact, a path to the team to be slightly worse than that. There's a path for the team to be way worse than that. But there is also a path for the team to be way better than that. And, that's the beauty of football season, is that we get to sit and now we get to watch it all unfold. And that's the fun part, right? And we get to be along for the ride and watch all of that happen. And that's the joyful thing. But all of this being said, Brain, you and I both feel we are in agreement that it is most likely that these are still the same old Dolphins.
Nothing's more same old Dolphins than 9 or 10 wins.
Yeah, I mean, that is as same old Dolphins as it gets right there. So we'll see how this season goes. It doesn't mean there's no possibility that the team is going to win. And listen, we want to see them do well, and we're going to be here with you every step of the way. And we hope that you will be with us here on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel, and that if you have not yet become a subscriber to Dolphins Talk Extra, that you will come along and join us. Patreon.com/Dolphins Talk, as little as $3 a month, as much as $10 a month if you're really feeling generous. But come along, lots of good content coming your way all through the regular season. Don't forget, you can get in for the Pick'em pool and the Survivor pool over there as well. Join the Discord, get the bonus content. It's all coming your way over there at Dolphins Talk Extra. And of course, make sure you're visiting dolphinstalk.com each and every day, because all of that content that you've come to know and love from Dolphins Talk, it's not going anywhere. It's still coming to you all the time. All the daily podcasts, all the articles, they're coming to you. That's still free. But this is just an opportunity for you to do a little bit of extra stuff as well along the way. So, programming note, no live show on Monday because, well, let's be honest, I'm going to be in Hershey, Pennsylvania at the Green Day concert on Monday. That was supposed to happen a couple weeks ago, but it got postponed. Long story. But
there's also nothing to recap.
Yeah, there also won't be anything to recap that Monday. We can recap my trip to the Green Day concert, except that I will be there. But we can, so no show Monday, but Wednesday, as I mentioned, we will be on the Dolphins Talk Roundtable with Mike and Tom, and hopefully Ian can be there with us as well. And then Thursday, we will be back with a live Same Old Dolphin show on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel, previewing the Jacksonville Jaguars game. And so we'll be talking about that for you. And then the podcast will drop as normal. And then the following Monday will be the first of our live exclusive Dolphins Talk Extra live streams of the Same Old Dolphins. That's right. Our Monday night shows, our Monday night reaction shows are going to be exclusively live for Dolphins Talk Extra subscribers. So if you want to join in on the Monday night reaction shows, you got to be a member of Dolphins Talk Extra. Of course, after the live stream is ended, the on-demand version will be available as normal on YouTube for everybody. But if you want to participate live in the chat, you're going to have to be on Dolphins Talk Extra, at least for those Monday night shows. The Thursday preview shows will be available to everybody on Dolphins Talk YouTube channel as per usual. Some other good stuff coming your way. Live stream, live watch alongs coming your way on Dolphins Talk Extra. And we may even have, who knows, maybe we'll even have a little sneak preview of that is open up to everybody before that happens. So just stay tuned. Make sure you're following along with DolphinsTalk.com and the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. And of course, the I'm a Miami Dolphin fan Facebook page. So again, a reminder, if you haven't done so already, smash the like button. If you would, we'd appreciate it. Leave us a note in the comments. Let us know, what do you think is the most likely outcome for you this season? 0 to 6 wins, 7 to 8 wins, 9 to 10 wins, 11 or 12 wins, or 13 or more. Let us know in the comments. We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? And that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Brain, it's been a pleasure doing a couple of shows in the same room with you. Looking forward to maybe doing some more of these in the future. How's that sound?
It sounds very likely.
Yeah, it does sound very likely. It sounds very exciting. And you know, who knows, maybe we'll even have those in the official Same Old Dolphin Show studios, because it's almost ready. It's getting close. It's getting close over there. This is makeshift studio number 2 or 3 since I moved out of the old house, but the studio is almost ready. So I'm really excited to share that with all of you. Maybe, who knows, if you're with Dolphins Talk Extra, maybe you get a little sneak peek. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for listening. As always, take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, go Dolphins!
I was on the Chris Greer hype train for all of about 2 weeks.